Okay, Peter, just wondering why and when you started this trip and a bit of information as to the history of the whole program that is now Plumbago.
It began in the middle to late 1970s. I realised that so many of the students at school just assumed that when you turned the tap on, there'd be water, and that you could go to the fridge for food or the supermarket for food. And I also realised that very few of them had much concept of what most of Australia was like. So I was looking to put them into an isolated area so that they felt isolated, where they had to be responsible for their own food, as far as possible their own water and their own camping gear. I wanted them to understand that it was possible to be very isolated and yet, if properly prepared, safe.
Fantastic. Is there a particular reason why you chose Plumbago itself?
Yes. My last job in exploration was looking for uranium in this general area, covering Calamity, Plumbago, and it satisfied the requirement that it needed to be isolated, and I knew a little bit about it. I wasn't completely familiar with all the roads or anything, but at least I had an introduction to the area. So that's really why we came here.
What are some of the favourite moments, some of your magic moments from this trip in the past years that you've been on?
This past year,
or any previous years, any of the years that you've done?
Just a few experiences that illustrate what this trip can do in the way of bringing people together or changing behaviours. Coming home from one trip, I don't remember which year it was, I was talking to one of the boys, and he told me that before he came on the trip, he knew there were a number of other boys in the class were so uncomfortable in the class that they were thinking of leaving Huntingtower. And the trip completely did away with all of the petty rivalries and cattiness in the class and welded them together, and the boys forgot about leaving. That was one. Another one, from very early on, one of the first of the trips, I remember there were two girls whose feet were so uncomfortable that they couldn't wear boots, and they were forced, they could only wear socks and thongs. And although they were given the option of riding in a vehicle, they refused. They walked the whole way, even though they were very, very uncomfortable. And in those days, they were walking in skirts. That's another one. Another one, much more recently, coming up in the bus, I was talking to one of the female HT staff, and I said, "You're looking forward to the trip?" And it very quickly became apparent that she wasn't. Fast forward to the last day and we walk into Plumbago, and I saw this teacher, arms around another staff member's neck, crying her heart out. At some point, I don't remember when, I discovered that very early on in the trip, other girls in the group, students, had discovered this teacher's fear, and they enclosed her and brought her through. It's a wonderful example of how Broken Hill eliminates conventional barriers, conventional stereotypes. It is never always about the adults assisting the students. It can equally be that the students help the adults. And in my own case, I remember again one of the early trips when on the first day of the walk I had very severe diarrhoea, and I made it into camp at Billaroo, and I was past looking after the rest of the group, and I just lay down under a tree. And after the students had had tea, one of the boys brought me the remains of his rice, and he said, "Mr. Wilk, would you like some rice?" And I was just so grateful for that, because I was incapable of getting it for myself, but it was exactly what I needed. So there are some examples of my experience at Broken Hill. I think it has the potential, well, no, not the potential, it gives students sometimes very unexpected opportunities to show just what heights they are capable of in terms of support of others. And so often you're never challenged at this level, and yet the way in which some of the students have risen to the challenges of all sorts is I think, a great lesson, a great reminder that we frequently underestimate what the students are capable of, and we frequently don't challenge them enough.